I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship, New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we're going to talk about one of the most dangerous things that can happen on board a warship, or any ship for that matter, firefighting. In a previous video, linked in the description below, we talked about flooding on board, and today we're going to cover another one of the damage control challenges of a battleship. Watertight doors like this one, in addition to being watertight and preventing the spread of water throughout the ship, also make excellent fire boundaries. This one is part of the boundary between Zone 3, the forward part of the ship, and Zone 4, aft of us. Not all of the watertight doors are part of fire boundaries like that, but this one is. We also have a fire station here. One of the systems on board is the fire and flushing system, which uses seawater to fill hoses and toilets. It's the non-potable type of water that we've got running through the ship. There are a number of fire stations like this one with connection points for hoses located all over the ship, from deep down in engineering all the way up the superstructure. So now we're in one of the AFFF mixing stations that was added to a 5-inch magazine down on third deck off of Broadway. AFFF, or aqueous film forming foam, is a fire suppressant that can be mixed on board. Prior to the 1980s, the battleship had canisters of foam with special nozzles that would have attached to the firefighting equipment, called eductors, which would drag up some of the foam in addition to the seawater they were pumping to put it out on fires. AFFF is much better for smothering fires as opposed to just pouring water on it. So there's a couple of different kinds of fires that you can have on a ship. Classed Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Alpha would be things like wood or combustible materials, cloth, burning. With a screaming alpha being combustible materials being worn by something that can scream, burning. Class Bravo would be a fuel source that's burning, usually oil, diesel, and any of those sorts of flammable liquids, grease from the deep fat fryer. With a Class A fire, the alphas, you can spray water on that and the cloth will go out, the wood will go out. You spray water on a fuel source that's burning, a liquid type fuel source, and oil floats on water. So you're going to fill a space with water, and the oil is going to sit on top of that and continue to burn and then flow into the next space and spread the fire more. So that's why we have AFFF. There's also Charlie fires, which are electrical in nature. The key to fighting a Class C fire is to stop the source of the electricity. You definitely don't want to spray it with water or even the foam that's mixed with water. So something else to talk about while we're in here is the color of the piping. Typically, green pipes are seawater, while blue pipes are freshwater. There's also red pipes, and those are the fire and flushing system. It's also seawater, but it's a completely different system from straight up green pipes, which are usually like cooling water to engines and stuff like that. When you see a pipe that is striped red and green, that means it's AFFF. Not all ships have AFFF pre-mixed. We've already talked about how the Battleship only got in the 1980s. But on here, it is a specific mixture that we've got. So now we're in Damage Control Central, a comparatively small space where the damage control officer would coordinate the ship's firefighting efforts. Notice that he has access to the damage control plates. So as people call in with damage control reports and say that there is flooding in this compartment or that compartment, he can check the plates and then, the flooding is in an engine room. That could be fuel related. We probably want to go down there with AFFF. And we probably want to try and fight it with that before we go to the halon suppressive gas system that was added in the 1980s. Or maybe there is flooding in a certain space, and he looks at it on the book, and it's a magazine space. So we just want to pull the flood switches for that space, which many of them are right here in Damage Control Central, so that he can flood the magazine and prevent any other fire. During World War II, American damage control training and equipment was unparalleled, and the United States Navy was able to salvage ships that otherwise should have been lost. Battleships tended to be easy to perform damage control on because they have a number of redundancies, and they are resilient when it comes to receiving damage in the first place. World War II did start the practice in the Navy that has continued to this day, that faster, less armored ships are more effective, particularly aircraft carriers and destroyers. And these ships continue to serve in leading roles in the Navy today, whereas heavily armored ships like battleships are no longer in existence anywhere in the world, or at least not on active duty. Now, aircraft carriers, in addition to being less armored than battleships, despite being similar size, not only have to worry about external threats, but also internal threats. There's a significantly larger amount of fuel handling and ordnance handling inside aircraft carriers than there is on battleships. Our ordnance delivery systems are part of the ship. We fire the gun and the ordnance goes. With aircraft carriers, the planes are their ordnance delivery systems, so they have to take the bombs out of magazines and roll them up through a wide open hangar deck to put them on aircraft, and they have to fuel those aircrafts with combustible materials. Aircraft need to be light, so they tend to be made out of aluminum, which burns at relatively low temperatures compared to the steel that makes up a warship like this one. And so we see during World War II, carriers take a tremendous amount of damage in combat. And then during the Vietnam War, where our operational tempo was really high, and we were using old World War II era ordnance that wasn't particularly stable, and people were just tired from our high tempo of operating during the war, we had a number of accidents on board U.S. Navy aircraft carriers, which led to significant loss of life and damage. After repeated accidents during the Vietnam War, damage control became the subject of reform. Some of those reforms still exist today, and many of them led to modifications that were made to these battleships in the 1980s. One tragic accident in particular was the fire on board USS Forrestal, in which aviation gasoline and ordnance exploding on the flight decks and the hangar decks of fully loaded aircraft ready to be sortied killed successive waves of damage control men. On board ships, there are individuals who have specific damage control ratings who train for this sort of thing. With the Forrestal fire, the first responders went in to deal with the fire, and then more ordnance exploded and killed many of them, which led to other waves of damage control men being sent in, and further explosions killed and wounded those men. And so at a certain point, damage control men working on Forrestal were not trained damage control men, they were just random sailors who grabbed firefighting equipment to try and save their ship. In this instance, they pumped both water and AFFF onto fires, and the water washed AFFF away, and it just wasn't as efficient as it should have been. And so the Navy started training all sailors on damage control techniques to an even greater extent than they had during World War II and Vietnam in the pre-Forrestal Fire days. Since Vietnam, there have been no major fires on operating aircraft carriers, although a significant fire earlier this year, a fire on Bonhomme Richard when she was in port for yard work without many of her crew on board, has led to that ship being rendered inoperable. Major wartime accidents have been unheard of since Vietnam. This is particularly important when you consider the Gulf War, in which 6 American supercarriers operated in the Persian Gulf at an extremely high tempo. In the late 80s and early 90s, Battleship New Jersey had one of the best damage control teams in the Navy on board, and on multiple occasions earned excellence awards for her damage control. What pieces of damage control equipment were you trained in if you served in the military? Let us know in the comments section down below. The museum receives operational support through a grant from the New Jersey Department of State. If you would also like to support the museum and our YouTube channel in particular, check the description down below for a link to the GoFundMe campaign we have running. Also remember to like, share, and subscribe so you're notified when we put out more content. We try to put out new content several times a week. Thanks for watching.